Hi, my name is Jacob Monk. This is a lecture with the title, Nazism and Zionism, What is the Difference? The lecture is read by a digital assistant. Many people believe that Nazism and Zionism are opposing ideologies, but this is wrong. Both of these ideologies are based on nationalism and racism. Hitler was a huge admirer of Zionism and he tried to move the German Jews to Palestine in the 30s. Otto Adolf Eichmann, Hitler's most trusted officer, spoke Yiddish and collaborated with the Zionist Stern Group in the British occupation area of Palestine. But unfortunately, this cooperation did not succeed and the result was not what Hitler had wanted. Hitler and the Zionists in Palestine had signed a mutual agreement called the Haavara Agreement, and the basis for this agreement was the fact that they had the same goal. They wanted to move the Jews from Germany to Palestine. In fact, similarity between the two ideologies was so great, that in most of the time from when Hitler came to power in 1933 and until the start of the war in 1940, there was close cooperation between the Zionist leaders and the Nazis. The reason was that both had the opinion that the Jews belonged to a separate race different from the German race and that the Jews should have their own place outside Europe and their own nation. From the Zionists' point of view, it was a question of getting a place where the Jews was not persecuted. Seen from the Nazi point of view, the goal was to liberate Europe from the people who, after the German opinion, was the cause of First World War and all the tragedies of Europe. The Zionist-Nazi cooperation was reflected in Haavara Agreement signed in 1933, where senior representatives of Zionism in Palestine and Nazism in Germany agreed to work together to promote the emigration of German Jews from Germany to Palestine. This agreement was confirmed by Hitler as late as 1938, where he made it clear to his followers that it should be respected. His perspective was to empty Germany for Jews and move the Jews to Palestine, the same goal as the Zionists had. The collaboration between Nazis and Zionists also continued during the war itself, but now under new forms. Hitler used, namely the Judenrat, elected by German Jews as a partner to gather the Jews before they were transported to the camps. The Judenrat thought that the deported Jews would go to Palestine. They thought that the concentration camps were merely collecting points, from where the Jews were to be sent into permanent exile. And this was also the original desire of Hitler. But this was not possible because of the war and the resulting conditions, that made it impossible for Hitler to achieve his objectives. Many of the Jews died in the concentration camps, not because of gassing, but because of disease, starvation, and liquidations. What is the basis of the Nazi and the Zionist religion? Both Nazism and Zionism are based on ancient religions. It is well known that Zionism is based on the Jewish religion, but truth is that also Nazism and its view on human beings has been influenced by an old religion, and that is Indian Brahmanism, today called Hinduism. It was no coincidence that Hitler chose the Hindu symbol for sun as his logo and a landmark for his European Brahmins, that is the Germans and the Scandinavians, also called the Aryan race. In Sanskrit, the word Arya means civilized, and Hitler's scientists believed, like many Orientalists believe even today, that the Aryans once emigrated from the Russian steppes to Europe and to India, where they now constitute the highest caste called the Brahmins. Hitler believed that these people should be the leading elite in Europe. They had been the intellectual elite for centuries, but now this superiority should be institutionalized, and the competing ethnic groups, that is the Jews, should be eliminated. All this you can read in Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. Even though Nazism took inspiration from Hinduism, that does not mean that Nazism can be called a religion in the usual sense, because Nazism was not universal. It was a German national ideology. The Nazi race doctrine had certain features in common with the faith that underlies the Indian caste system, but Hitler got his ideology not only from Brahmanism, but also from contemporary racial and national romantic writers such as the Frenchman Arthur de Gobineau and the Englishman Houston Stewart Chamberlain. Both of them wrote famous books about the roots of white supremacism. What is the relationship between supremacism and racism? Both are based on the notion that there is one ethnic group or race that rises above other people in intelligence, beauty, and moral quality. Hitler felt that it was the Aryans and the Zionists believed, and still believe today, that it is the Jews. It was the belief in this superiority, that was the justification of the Nuremberg laws in 1935, which cut off all non-Aryans their rights and prohibited any form of genetic integration between Jews and non-Jews. Hitler wanted the Jews to emigrate from Germany and to move to Palestine, and he worked together with the Zionist movement in Palestine. The Jews and their rabbis believed, that integration between Jews and Goys, non-Jews, was evil, because you are only a Jew if your mother is a Jew. So every Jewish man having children with a Gentile is undermining the Jewish race. Israel is the modern ghetto of the Jews. It serves the same purpose as the medieval ghetto system, that is to secure that the Jews would not assimilate and marry Goys. The purpose of the Zionist state is the same. God's chosen people cannot remain an exclusive tribe if they marry and have children with inferior races, and therefore intermarriage has always been seen as a big sin for members of the Jewish community. This fear of assimilation is also the reason that most Jews in Israel oppose the only realistic solution to their conflict with the indigenous people in the area that today is called Israel, namely the Palestinians. This solution is of course that the Jews and the Palestinians forms a common state. This solution would have the majority of the Palestinians and the Arab countries' support, but the Jews don't want it. They are afraid to be a minority in the Israeli state. But the alternative to this is even more frightening, because if they establish a separate Palestinian state, the state will be in permanent conflict with Israel. Therefore, the Jews prefer to keep the present situation going so long as possible. They don't mind being torturers and occupiers, and they don't care about the condemnations from most of the countries in this world. They only care about USA, because here their Jewish co-believers have the control of all the medias and all the politicians. And USA is the strongest military power in the world. What is victim mythology? Both Zionism and Nazism are based on victim mythology. To Hitler it was the First World War and the Treaty of Versailles from 1919 that made the Germans historically victimized. He believed that the Jews had betrayed the Germans by helping the British to get the United States involved in the war, which had led to the German defeat. Therefore, it was the rejection of the Versailles Treaty that united the Germans and made them prepare for war again. Hitler believed that Germany had been victim of an international conspiracy and that this justified a German rearmament to get justice restored. Hitler had read The International Jew, a book written by Henry Ford about the Versailles Conference, and this book convinced Hitler that the Jews had played a major role in the degrading of Germany. Jews believe that they have been persecuted for 2,000 years, and that this persecution culminated in the so-called Holocaust during World War II. In the first years of the Israeli state, the Zionists believed that European Jews had not made any real resistance against the persecution, and they therefore did not want to remember the events during World War II. They were ashamed. But after the Arabic-Israeli War in 1967, Hollywood redefined the Jewish mythology and Israeli Zionists began to reinterpret history and to sacrilege the Holocaust. This event was now turned into a world ideology and an ongoing money machine, that served the purpose of showing the world the evil moral character of the Christian religion and the superiority of the Jews. Hollywood produced a number of films and television series, which showed the Jewish version of World War II history, and the concept of Holocaust now became the central part of this story. This meant that the curriculum of the schools in the Western world, the national holidays and the propaganda in television was changed. The Holocaust was seen as more important than the war itself. Therefore, every child in the Western world knows that 6 million Jews were killed during World War II. But only 1% knows that 27 million Christian Russians were killed in the same war. At the same time, a wave of propaganda was initiated. No one had the right to challenge the correctness of the Jews' understanding of history. If they did, they were immediately met with the accusation of being anti-Semites or Holocaust deniers, and that meant losing their jobs and, probably, going to jail. In the Jewish-controlled states in Europe, anyone can freely deny the existence of Jesus, or they can claim that Virgin Mary was a whore. Blasphemy is popular, especially in the Protestant Scandinavia. But if one writes that the figure 6 million is a propagandistic exaggeration, then one will be prosecuted and go to jail in a number of European countries. If it is up to the international Jewish interest groups, ADL, JDL, etc., these laws should apply worldwide. Criticism of the Jews should be prohibited. Is democracy only for the chosen? When it comes to the perception of what democracy is, we find big similarities between Zionism in Israel and Nazi Germany. When Hitler came to power in 1933, he made the Social Democrats and the Communist Party illegal, and shortly hereafter he passed a law that gave him, all alone, the right to issue future laws, without the need for approval by the political parties in parliament. Hereafter no more parliamentary elections were held. In Israel, there will be periodic elections, but there are race-specific laws saying which political decisions are legal and not legal. The Israeli lawmakers have made sure that more than 90% of the land can only be owned by Jews. The Arabs have the same status in Israel as the black people had in South Africa before apartheid was abolished. The Arabs, that is more than 1 million people living in Israel, are not given any other possibility to support themselves than being wage laborers for the Jewish businesses. The legislation gives freedom and economic opportunities to the Jews, but not to the Arabic population living in Israel, and not to the Palestinians in the occupied territories. And the occupied territories themselves, will they ever be given back to the Palestinians? What is the relationship between Israel and the world's community? Neither the Nazis nor Zionists like international cooperation. In connection with the Treaty of Versailles, it was decided to create an international league that would unite all the nations of the world and make any future wars impossible. When Hitler came to power in 1933, he took Germany out of the League of Nations, and the rest of the world therefore had limited means to restrain Germany and prevent the rearming and the militarism of the Hitler government. The same attitude to the world community, Israel has shown since the war in 1967. It did not resign from the UN, but in return it has clearly shown that it does not respect the decisions taken in this organization. After the 1967 war, the UN Security Council endorsed Resolution No. 242, which requires Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories, but even today, 50 years later, it has not happened. And the same with 50 or more other UN resolutions and statements, about the occupation of the Palestinian and Syrian territories, and about Israel's treatment of Palestinians. Israel does not care. They have not signed the International Agreement on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, but they don't stop complaining about the great danger they feel about the fact that Iran wants to build nuclear power plants. Although Iran long ago has signed this agreement. What is the conclusion? I have shown that it is possible to compare Nazism to Zionism, not only in terms of racist ideology, but also in terms of the policy that the followers of the two ideologies support. The main difference between the two ideologies is probably the degree of control and influence that their followers have over the international press and media industry. The Nazis in the 30s would very much like to keep peace with England and the United States, but they did not have any necessary means to influence public opinion in these countries. Zionism has not a similar problem today. Never has the international news media been so concentrated on one country, and never before has a single religion, that is Judaism, had that kind of impact on the world's greatest power, the United States. The role that the supporters of Zionism play in the center of international media, is of such a magnitude, that you can question whether or not there exists a free debate in the US and in the so-called free world. The Western media coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is so one-sided that one cannot wonder that frustration and fanaticism are spreading in the Arab and the Muslim world. Democratic debate cannot happen if one part of the conflict owns the media where this debate should take place. And without a free debate, we will never hear the truth. Therefore, the political democracies of the Western world have long ago lost their moral legitimacy. There is no reason to wonder why the Islamic world, Russia, China, Asia, and most of the world population, feels frustrated about the American control. Global organizations to oppose the dominant power of USA is formed. Shanghai Organization and BRICS are not known by most people in the West, but these organizations are the framework of the resistance. We are going from a Jewish-controlled world to a multipolar world, and racist ideologies, that is Nazism and Zionism, has no future. Democracy just does not work. It is sad to note, but like the international community could not control Nazism, it can and it will not control Zionism. Nazism led to World War II, and the Zionists have long expressed their wish to start the Third World War by bombarding Iran. Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya have already been bombed, the countries are destroyed and millions of people have died. But Israel is not satisfied. Just as Hitler was seized by hubris when he occupied Austria, Poland, and France, the right-extreme Jews in Israel and US has the same megalomania. The world is in danger, because the power of USA, Europe, and NATO has no legitimacy. The West tells the world that racist Nazism is bad. But the rest of the world wonders why the same is not said about racist Zionism. And they get the answer that Zionism is different because of the Holocaust. But the West forgets that Holocaust is something that they care about in Israel, US and its European colonies. The rest of the world, that is 90%, really does not care. Thank you for listening.